This is Kevin Harrington, original shark from Shark Tank, inventor of the infomercial, and you're listening to Jamy Bechler from Success is a Choice.
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. This is your host, Jamy Bechler, and today we're very honored to have Jay Korff with us as our guest. He is a general assignment reporter with ABC 7, WJLA-TV, and News Channel 8 down in Washington, D.C. Jay's received 41 Regional Emmy Awards, 19 Regional Edward R. Murrow Awards, 3 National Headliner Awards, and 3 National Murrows. In other words, he's a big deal when it comes to reporting. You've been covering the news business for quite a while, and in a lot of different locations. What are some of the differences now covering the news as opposed to when you first started off, and maybe what are the differences based upon when you were in Nashville or Fort Wayne, Indiana, or up in Wisconsin, and now you're in Washington D.C. So just kind of give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, so I started off as I think that most journalists should, and that's in a very small market. You can learn to grow, you can learn to struggle, you can make mistakes at a reasonable pace, and that was in the capital in Helena, Montana. And I got to tell you, I was there for 3 brutal winters. That is a cold, cold place, but the people have very warm hearts there. And I had a wonderful experience in Helena, then went on and worked in Wisconsin, then in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where my wife's family's from. And then I was in, we were in Nashville for almost a decade. Loved Nashville. That's where I think I really learned how to become a reporter. And then was blessed enough to, my wife got a position in the Washington D.C. area, and then I've been here for about 15 years. And, D.C. is really a unique place. When people talk about that beltway mentality, it really is true. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think that Washington, D.C. can do a better job about feeling like they understand the wants and the needs of people all throughout the country. But as far as being a reporter in Washington, it is intense. I mean, one day you're covering a huge case up on a tectonic Supreme Court case involving health care or same-sex marriage. The next day you're at a big rally or protest. Maybe there's a big legislative battle on Capitol Hill. Not to mention, as a general assignment reporter, I cover all the other sort of non-political related things that happen in the city, be it weather, crime. So it really is a humbling and also an inspiring environment to be in, because I think that when you're a witness to history as it unfolds in real time, you feel like you really have a responsibility to get it right. And so I really do take that very seriously. But, Nashville is an amazing place to work. Everybody is so friendly that it's really easy to kind of get the person on the street interviews and to engage people. And people are, I think, in the South, once you're with them for 4, 5, or 6 years and they trust you, they're always going to trust you. In Washington, D.C., there isn't a lot of that sort of inherent trust. It takes a long time to be able to get sources, to get contacts. But there's no place I'd rather be, because I think that this is the seat of power in our country. And, like I said, it's being a reporter in this town is one that's very challenging, but also very humbling, and one that I take very seriously.
You talk about the people that you're around. You are around a lot of powerful people who wield a lot of influence there in Washington, D.C. Are there some common traits that you see among the people who are truly respected by others rather than just kind of exerting their authority? So you're around people that are powerful. Some are respected. Some just have positions of authority.
I was lucky enough, and this was so hard for me in my first job. I've been a state capitol reporter in a few different states. So I covered the state capitol in Helena, Montana, which primarily Republican governors. When I was in Tennessee, I covered the state capitol. It was primarily Democratic leadership when I was there, Phil Bredesen. And then, now that I'm here in the Washington, D.C. area, I'll cover the state capitol from time to time in Virginia and Maryland, and then, of course, the U.S. Congress. And I would say that to me, the thing that really resonated with me was that, there's this big difference, in my opinion, between somebody who, from a political perspective, is a politician or a public servant. And I think that people really gravitate to the public servant, the person who is focused on simply trying to solve problems for their particular constituency. I remember one of my favorite, politicians from a personal perspective was a really conservative politician in Montana, Governor Mark Rothko. Just a wonderful, down-to-earth guy. And then when I worked in Tennessee, Phil Bredesen, incredibly successful mayor of Nashville and then governor of the state of Tennessee. Very middle-of-the-road guy, didn't care about politics, came from a business background as a healthcare mogul, and then transitioned into politics. And he even admitted when he was campaigning he was not a good public speaker. He was not a good orator, but he had a lot of great ideas, and he wanted to solve the problems of the state. And and then you can take someone like Larry Hogan, of the state of Maryland. He's conservative, but he's really tackled his job as the governor, and I think sort of a very down-to-earth way. Let's just solve the problem of the people of the state. But to directly deal with your question, I think that truly the powerful and successful people that I've noticed tend to listen to you. They might not have a whole lot of time, but they care about what you're saying, and they respond to what you're saying, and they appear to be sincere. And I think that when you spend time around certain people, like, let's say, a John McCain, he's going to whisk in and out of a hallway really quickly, but when he answers your question, he's going to look you in the eye, and you feel like he's paying attention to you. And, whether you agree with someone's politics or not, I think that that's something that we all respect. Let's take one final example. The gubernatorial race here in Virginia is something that I've been covering. Ed Gillespie's the Republican, Ralph Northam is the Democrat. These guys had a big debate the other day, and it wasn't partisan at all. They complimented each other. They talked about the things that they want to try to achieve for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it was just very refreshing to not see that partisanship. So I think that when they act like you're the only person in the room and they're listening to you, I think that really resonates with a lot of people.
That's a great story about that meeting and not being partisan. Because it seems like the news is constantly full of negative stories and that our world is so dangerous but you see some good, I imagine, daily. You see some of the things that maybe not everybody else sees. What are some things that you've seen recently that encourage you or give you hope people can make a difference?
You are touching upon an issue, Jamie, that is very, very near and dear to my heart and frankly to my professional existence. When I talk with viewers, people I meet on the street, friends, when I'm out and about, they tell me time and time again that the news is too negative. And I don't think that people are talking about like the story of the day, but I think it's just a general tone of news. And it's frankly not an accurate reflection upon our lives. Even if you take a look at crime stats from the Justice Department, we live in a meaningful and rich and joyful and predominantly safe world. We really do. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually got really, really lucky and feel very blessed and very grateful for my employer. I actually convinced them, to start my own franchise about a year and a half ago here at WJLA called ABC 7 Stories. And what we do is we focus on stories that are enlightening and impactful and that, in my opinion, will leave the viewer feeling good about the world around them. Or maybe it'll cause them to think about something or to act in a way. And, we just, at the end of last year, we finished up a 30-minute documentary on the powerful and, tear-inducing items that are left behind at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Wall in Washington, D.C. That was a story that across the board, I was getting Vietnam veterans who were reaching out to me personally saying, because I watched this, I'm able to feel better now. You told my story. I can share this with other people, and I don't have to explain to them what happened to me in Vietnam. I can just show them this. So we have an opportunity. You do, I do, everybody out there has an opportunity to present things in, of course, in a fair way, in an accurate way, but why not do it in a way that helps people feel better about themselves? I did a goofy story about it, and you come from a coaching background. You've probably had some twins that have been on some of your teams, I would imagine. I did a story about 5 sets of sisters on the same high school soccer team. 5. It was bananas. And of course, that kind of sisterhood really created a wonderful environment for them. It was a very positive story, and people are getting in touch with me and they're saying, thank you for putting these stories out. Why aren't we doing more of these stories? And well, there's a couple things going on. One, unfortunately, if it bleeds, it leads, is still a bit of a philosophy in general within the business. But I will tell you this, the company that I work for, Sinclair Broadcast, SBG, they don't believe that. They believe that storytelling is really important, and they believe that connecting viewers to good content is really, really important. And Jamie, there are very few people in this country who are doing what I'm doing. I'm basically telling like old school Charles Kuralt-esque type stories that are, 3, 4, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. We're getting great response. Lastly, this is probably one of the most moving stories that I've ever done. I did it just a few months ago. There was a boy was dying of osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer, and the mother was desperately searching for a way that her son could get better treatments, could get medicines that aren't as poisonous. And so she started doing some research. She just happens to be, Jamie, a space engineer. So she has no background in biology, but she understands patterns. And so she comes up with, on her own, through regression analysis, data, genomic data, that researchers, that some of the leading researchers in the world have only been able to figure out. And so because of what she did, it's now leading to clinical trials that could eventually help kids with cancer survive for longer. So these are the kind of stories that I think they're relevant, they're hopeful, and they inform people about the human condition.
There truly is, I believe, a power of positivity, and I don't think that that's a little kooky thing. It's real. You can really change lives and make a difference in this world by being positive and pointing out positive things and doing kind things for others. You've kind of taken it even a step further, and you have a documentary film, a full-length documentary that's coming out very soon called Endure.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting time in my career. I don't believe in coincidences, Jamie. I think that everything is connected, and that one of the keys to life is being decisive. Now, of course, you have to plan for that. You have to work your tail off in order to, for those opportunities to happen. And it took a long time. It took, 23 years in the business, 24 years in the business before I sort of opened my eyes to this opportunity. But in a nutshell, there's a national tragedy going on in our country, and that is that too many kids are dying of cancer. They aren't getting the kind of research dollars that they should. Only 4% of the National Cancer Institute's budget from NIH goes for childhood pediatric disease research to clinical trials. The other 96% goes to other adult forms of cancer. And that is, of course, a national tragedy. That's not to say that other 96% is not really, really important. It actually proves the point of the childhood cancer community. When you look at that other 96%, the incredible and important advances that have happened in colon cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, and pancreatic cancer, especially breast cancer. My mother is a breast cancer survivor. The reason why we've had these amazing and tectonic advances is because those important research dollars are going in to things that can slow down cancers, can cure cancers, can lead to better treatments. So I started doing stories on the childhood cancer community about 4 or 5 years ago as a reporter. And I was so moved by this community and these children and their families and what they were enduring, literally what they were enduring, that I felt like I needed to do more. And the turning point was when a little girl named Gabriella Miller, who changed the world. She was the face of childhood cancer. She lived not far from where I live in Northern Virginia. She basically challenged me after I won an Emmy for a story that I did on her, and I gave that Emmy to her. And I knew she didn't have long to live. And she actually turned around. She's only 10 years old. She has all this moxie. And she said, you should do more of these kinds of stories. I mean, you won an Emmy for it. And I was like, well, it was kind of a long story, 3-4 minutes. We really don't do those kinds of stories all that much on TV, but they made an exception for you because your story was so important. And she says, so it sounds to me like, you need to do more stories like this because they were so powerful and they're so positive and they're so important. And she passed away a few months later, and man, she didn't change my life. So I decided that I would keep on doing these stories, and that led me to this kooky, wacky guy named Tom Mitchell. He's affectionately called Tattoo Tom. He runs a local childhood cancer foundation. He lost his daughter to cancer several years ago, and he has a foundation that gets non-medical needs to families who are in crisis. So he'll pay their rent, buy them clothes, pay for funeral expenses, things like that. And he decided that he was going to start to do these crazy races to raise money and to raise awareness. So first I followed him on a 100-mile race, finished that. That was a few years ago. And then 2 years ago, he tried the impossible, one of the hardest ultramarathons in the country that circumnavigates Lake Tahoe. It's got 40,000 feet of elevation gain. It's called the Tahoe 200, a 200-mile race. And so I decided that I was going to take some vacation time, buy some equipment, teach myself, how to shoot video, how to edit, and just it was something that I believed that I could do, and frankly that I should do. I had a moral obligation to do it. So I followed him around for 4.5 days while he tried to finish this race and raise awareness. And 2.5 years later, the documentary is out, and it's really powerful. It's raw, but it's also really riveting. And I think it tells an important message.
Where can people find out more about this video?
Yeah, so all they have to do is just go to endurefilm.com, so ENDUREFILM, endurefilm.com, and that's where they can rent it or they can buy it. And as you know, the most important thing is that if someone believes in something and they think that somebody else needs to see it, please share it with other people. Tell the world about what these kids are going through, and that together we have the power, to change people's lives.
We will make sure to put those that website, that link into the show notes so people can check that out. And it is coming out November 16th, and so you can definitely check those out. Check that movie out, that documentary out. Highly recommended. I've watched the trailer. It looks pretty riveting, and it looks pretty moving. And so now, did you run anything? Did you run any while he was running?
So that's a really good question. I get that question a lot, and for me, preparation is everything. If I'm not prepared when I go to work, if I don't know the news of the day, if I don't know the news that happened a month ago, what if something develops in that story? I'm stuck. I have a very limited amount of time to turn around my GA stories. Well, that's how I approached this. I'm really, really lucky. And one of the reasons why I felt like I could do this was that I'm a competitive athlete myself. I've been a competitive trail runner on and off when I'm not injured for about 20 years. And I'm a competitive mountain bike racer. And I come from a cycling background. So when I realized what I would have to do, I actually stopped my racing about 4 to 6 months before Tom's race. And I started training very specifically to what I would experience there. So if I would go on a hike or go on a run, I'd bring a 25-pound rock, or I would bring a huge log that was 30 or 40 pounds, and I would take that on my hike or on my run. And when I was mountain biking, I would put a pack on that weighed 30 pounds so that I could mimic what was about to happen to me. And so what ended up happening was when I went there, I was physically really prepared for this event. I would say that I ended up hiking, running, or mountain biking. The primary way that I got around the course was via mountain bike. I'd say I probably logged about 75 or 80 of the 200 miles. The thing that I did not anticipate was the elevation. It was very dry. There were a lot of wildfires in the area, and I ended up getting pretty dehydrated at about day 3. This is about a 4.5-day event. And on top of that, I think the hardest thing was the sleep deprivation. So I would go in and out of every aid station in a vehicle, and I would film Tom as he was coming in and out, and I would ride in and out of each of the aid stations to get video of him. Then I'd get back in the vehicle, then go to the next aid station, and I'd do this over and over and over again for 4.5 days. So I would get sleep when I could, and I would sleep when he would sleep. He only ended up averaging about 45 minutes a night. And I'd say that I ended up sleeping maybe an hour to an hour and a half a night, maybe. So by day 3, you're losing your mind. And you have to navigate the course on a machine, and you've got to run a machine, you got to run the camera. And it got pretty dicey, and of course everybody's on edge. So as you see the film unfold, definitely tensions rise and tempers flare, and I think that's just a normal part of people pushing themselves beyond their limit. But I will tell you this: one of the reasons why we were all able to get through this and why we were able to film this was that one of the people who was crewing, because normally these things you need people to help you. So you have like people who, when you come into an aid station, they'll make sure that you change your socks and shoes, that Tom does, that you're getting the right fuel. They're there to encourage you. One of the crew members for Tom was a woman named Laura Owens, who only 5 or 6 weeks before the race, her son Cole had died of cancer. And he was running, so what Tom did was for each of these 200 miles, he dedicated a different mile to a different child who's either fighting cancer or has died of cancer. And so Cole was one of those miles. And so here's this mother with us who'd just gone through the absolute worst trauma that any human being can go through. And she was the one being strong for us. So there was no way that we could have stopped.
What a powerful story, and about overcoming challenges, obstacles, pushing through, focusing on your goal, using teamwork, all those things. So look forward to that film coming out. During your professional career, you've had challenges. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've had, and how have you been able to overcome those?
It's interesting. I actually never thought that I would be a news reporter. I wanted to be the next Bob Costas or the next Dick Enberg. I was totally wrapped up in sports my whole life. And I played sports as an escape from issues at home, and I flourished in athletics. I found great perseverance, great discipline, all the great things that sport teaches you. And the first real challenge that I had was, one, I started stuttering, if you can believe this, really bad when I was in like junior high, early high school. And I really had to overcome that. Now, of course, I talk for a living. But the first challenge was, at my first job, I was having a really hard time getting a second job because I kept on wanting to go the sports route. And I had somebody who said, because when you're in a little market, you do everything. You're on the anchor desk, you're doing weather, you're doing sports, you're doing news. And somebody said to me, they're like, I don't want to offend you, but you're an okay sports guy, but you're a better news reporter. And I had to kind of have a serious discussion with myself. And I had to admit to myself that, I needed to work more on being a news reporter, but I thought that at the end of the day, if I really worked hard at it and I could find my voice, that I could help more people. I think that sports is something that's fun, it's fun to cover, but are you really helping people? And so I had to kind of take a deep breath and say, you know what, I'm going to commit myself to being a news reporter, and I never looked back. I think the other great challenge in my career was being able to effectively and sincerely compartmentalize the awful things that we see as reporters. I mean, we walk into people's lives often at the hardest moment of their life, and that takes a toll on you. I had an experience about 4 years into my job that totally changed me. I'm glad it happened. It was very painful, but I was always one of those reporters who, I have to be super objective. I can't have any feelings. And I remember there was this little boy who, for Christmas, had gotten a go-kart, and it was cold outside, and he had a scarf on, and the scarf got caught in the engine of the go-kart, and he was seriously injured. And I remember reaching out to the parents, wanting to do a story, and they could not have been nicer. They were so kind. I sat down and I talked with them off camera. We got to know each other as people. They took me in to see their son. It was really powerful. And I'd never really opened myself up emotionally to stories. Come to find out that truly great reporters, great storytellers, that's how we're able to tell great stories, is because we're willing to open ourselves up. We're willing to be a sponge. We take in this information, we take in what's happening to people, and we're able to kind of squeeze it out in a way that's respectful and decent and informative. And so a couple of weeks later, this little boy passed away. And when I found out, I'd never cried over a story before, but I was just weeping at my desk, like uncontrollably. And it was really a turning point for me, because it was like, it's okay to feel. You can do both things. And I think that as my career has evolved, I think that my ability to be empathetic and to be honest with people is something that really resonates with people. I think that they view us news reporters as being kind of cold-hearted and all these other things. That's not true at all. I mean, I'd say that most of the people who I know who have been in the business for a long time, we care so deeply about where we live and who we live around.
You've had an illustrious career, and you've won a lot of awards, and like you just told us with this story, you've kind of grown as a news reporter and your perspective. What are some of the things that stand out to you that you're most proud of, either stories that you've done or awards you've won, or just the people you've met and the relationships you've developed?
That's a really good question. I think that I'm really proud of the fact that I think something that we talked about before, and I think this takes time. I think this, you can't, this is something that you have to learn through trial and error, but I'm very proud of how I treat people in crisis. Sometimes when we go up to a family who just lost a loved one, let's say during the war in Iraq, they'll yell and scream at us, and, we don't want to be around you, and I walk away, and I be as respectful as I can. But then there are other people who open their door to you and want to tell you everything. And I think that the really important thing that us in journalism need to understand is that we should respect both perspectives. So that's something that I'm proud of. But that took a long time to figure that out. Personally, I've worked really hard at trying to balance my life and my work. And I'm really, really proud of the fact that my wife and my kids believe in me and that they support me. I mean, that means everything to me. This is a job can really consume you. And I think that one of the reasons why I'm able to do it is because I have a very supportive family, and they believe in me, and they believe in what I do. So that's something that I'm really proud of. And along the way, there have been stories that have happened that I know have led to, let's say, an organization being able to raise a lot of money for a certain cause. Or the one huge story that really sticks out to me was in Nashville, where this was when children started to get cochlear implants. And there was this particular child, she was maybe a year and a half old. She qualified perfectly for a cochlear implant. The insurance company was even willing to pay for it, but the particular hospital that they were going to do the procedure at was one of the few that was doing them at the time, and they weren't going to do it because they weren't going to make enough profit. Not that they weren't going to lose money, Jamie, but they weren't going to make enough profit off of this particular procedure. Well, we did a story, and I'd say within minutes after the story aired, everything was cleared up, and they were scheduling to get the procedure at this hospital for this little girl. And I think, a year later, they had turned on the cochlear implant, and this little girl can now communicate with her mother and father. It doesn't get any better than that.
Jay, we'd love to finish with some rapid fire questions. So just kind of off the top of your head, a podcast or a book that you're currently listening to or reading?
I really, really am just totally engaged with this book called All the Light We Cannot See. Most of the time it takes a book a little while for them to set up things and for you to feel like the narrative's really gripping. This book is absolutely incredible. I'm about halfway through it. All the Light We Cannot See. So, yeah, that's one I really like.
Who would you like to meet or spend time with that you don't already know?
This is going to sound really crazy, but they're all people who are not alive. I don't know if I'm answering your question very well. I've always been fascinated by people of peace. It's like I want to hear their secrets. I want to talk to Gandhi. I want to talk to MLK. I want to talk to Lincoln. I want to talk to Jesus. I want to know what their secret was. As far as people who are alive, this is going to sound crazy, but the the soundtrack of my childhood is The Boss. So I grew up with Thunder Road and Downbound Train, Born to Run. It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City. So, and Bruce Springsteen is a really cool guy. Like, I know people who know it. He's a really cool guy. I'd love to sit down and talk to him. And lastly, you know, a couple of my grandparents I never met because they passed away before I was born, so I think I'd like to meet them and spend some time with them.
What is a quote that is one of your favorites?
You know, I have a bunch. I mean, I would say that I want to say it's a Chinese proverb, but I'm not positive. But it's one that always kind of sticks in my mind. It's that we are made to persist. That's how we find out who we are. And there have been some really tough and challenging things that have happened to me in my life that I didn't discuss, personal things when I was a kid, that there was kind of this thing innately in me that said, you know, look, you can call up in the ball or you can brush yourself off and keep going. And what choice do you have? The other one is, there's actually two others really quickly. Eliud Kipchoge of Kenya, he is the great marathoner of our time. He has a saying that passion is a choice. You need to choose to be great. It's not a chance. It's a choice. And then the one that I live by every day is Micah 6:8, and that is to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly.
What is a favorite productivity tool or an app or a resource that you'd have a hard time living
Definitely
without?
my iPhone, and that's because, you know, I am in, and like not for social reasons, but, you know, I'm in a field that is technologically driven. And so we've been able to, on our phones, be able to do so many things. I mean, there's a reason why you're going to see journalists on their iPhone a lot. I mean, we take pictures that are then pushed immediately to the web. We can now broadcast Jamy live via our cell phone. There are phone apps that can allow us to broadcast live just with our cell phone. You know, I can write my stories. I can post my stories to Facebook, to Twitter, email. I mean, if I didn't have my iPhone, I mean, sure, like I still walk around with like my news pad, like my reporter's pad and my pen, and I can get by just fine with that. But in this day and age, I got to have the iPhone. Look, I started off in this business. I was working on an electric typewriter. I mean, I'm an old guy. I started in February of 1991. And, you know, the internet didn't really come out until, what, 96 maybe? Somewhere around there. At least it was, like, accessible to the regular public. And I remember, we didn't have cell phones. I remember I would be on some story. I had just, you know, like interviewed somebody up on Capitol Hill in Helena, and I'd go into, like, the secretary's office and ask them very politely if I could use their landline so I could call back to the station, you know, and, you know, give them an update on the story. And everybody was always so nice. Oh, sure, here, use the phone. Just, you know, push 8 or 9 to dial out.
Yep, it's certainly better than having a pager and using a payphone. Much better. If you could be on any reality show, what would it be?
I would probably have to say, isn't there that show called The Great Race? Yeah, you know, because I like to travel. I like a good challenge. I think I'm pretty resourceful. I think if you're not resourceful as a reporter, you're in deep trouble.
Where can people connect with you? You mentioned your movie website earlier. Is there a website or social media account?
If they just go to the TV station's website, which is WJLA.com, and then under that, my franchise is called ABC7 Stories. That's under the Features tab. And then all my stories are there from the last year and a half that I've been doing this. Yeah, so that's WJLA.com. That's the ABC affiliate in Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast today. You know, we have some excellent guests lined up in the coming weeks to help add value to your life, to help you maximize your success and reach your potential. We want to make sure that you don't miss a thing. So please take just a quick second to click that little subscribe button so you can get all the great upcoming episodes. Thanks so much. And until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?